Okay. All right.
Welcome, candidates. Just before we get started, I just want to ask everybody one quick question to make sure that we have got everybody's approval to do this candidate form by recording. If everybody could just give an affirmative nod to confirm that we can do this recording and then publish it, we'd appreciate it. Brian, do you approve?
I have no problem with that.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much. We'll get started here. Hello, I'm Deb Brinkman. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of St. Louis Park. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of St. Louis Park, I would like to welcome everybody tonight. Tonight's forum will run on Civic Channel 17 until the completion of the general election on November 3rd. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization which promotes political responsibility through informed and active participation in government. The League does not support or endorse political candidates or parties and never will. The views in this forum are those of the candidates. Sponsorship of this forum by the League of Women Voters is not an endorsement of any candidate. All viable candidates have been invited. We encourage our League members, as we encourage each of you to get involved in your community and in the political party of your choice. We ask that you consider becoming a member of the League of Women Voters and help us to continue to provide the citizens of our community the opportunity to hear candidates discuss issues that are important to you. For more information about membership, please contact us at www.lwvslp.org. I would like to introduce you to tonight's moderator, Linda Freeman. Linda is a member of BPOMG, which is Brooklyn Park, Osseo, Maple Grove. Welcome, Linda.
Hello and welcome. As Deb said, I am Linda Freeman of the League of Women Voters for Brooklyn Park, Osseo, and Maple Grove. I'm the moderator for tonight's candidate forum for State Senate District 46 and state representatives for Districts 46A and B. The candidates will make opening statements in alphabetical order by district. We have Senate District 46, Ron Latz and Brian Bjornson will be participating tonight. Then in Districts 46A, we have Ryan Winkler and Ann Taylor. His opponent declined the invitation to participate tonight. In 46B, we have Cheryl Joachim and her opponent, Melissa Moore, also declined to invitation to participate tonight. The candidates' questions include submitted questions from constituents and written questions from the League of Women Voters of St. Louis Park are also included in tonight's forum. We do have a timekeeper today, and so you will see a sign giving you a 30-second warning, and then a 15-second warning, and then stop when your time is up, and I would direct you to finish up your sentence as I'll be moving on to the next candidate. We will begin with candidate opening statements, which will be given in alphabetical order and are limited to 2 minutes each. We will be alternating candidates, so each candidate will get to respond to a question first, and then each candidate will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond to the questions. We will now begin with the opening statements, beginning with Mr. Bjornson.
Thank you, Linda. My name is Brian Bjornson, and I'd like to open it up my statement with a quote from a gentleman by the name of Tacitus, a Roman philosopher. The more corrupt the state, the more numerous the laws. Why do I want to be your state senator? Because I don't like governments. What Tacitus said in 1000 CE was true then, and it is still true today. It's time to elect people who want to reduce the size of our governments. As Calvin Coolidge once said, it is much more important to kill bad bills than to pass good ones. A bad bill is one that raises your taxes and creates government bureaucracy. As your state senator, my job is to get our state government out of your life and pocketbook as much as possible. If you want a smaller government and keep more of your money, hard-earned money, I am your candidate. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, we'll have Mr. Letts.
Thank you and good evening. Hello, Brian Bjornson. Nice to see you. And for everyone who's watching, thank you for the opportunity to participate, and thanks to the League for sponsoring this. I am Ron Latz. I'm your state senator in Senate District 46. I have served my community here where I live in St. Louis Park for quite a few years now. I was elected to the Senate in 2006. I was in the House for 4 years before that. I served on the City Council for 9 years before that. I grew up in Golden Valley and I graduated from Hopkins School District. So I truly am serving the community that I grew up with and continue to be proud and humbled to represent. My wife and my 3 children were raised in this community. Well, my wife wasn't, my 3 children were. My wife's a Robbinsdale grad. So I believe I continue to get reelected in this district because I have both a track record and a vision of justice and policies that reflect the values and are supported by the people in this district. Fighting climate change with aggressive action to reduce carbon emissions, approaching public safety with firmness and fairness while recognizing the impact of systemic racism on our communities of color, a well-funded education system that works to reduce achievement gaps, and a multimodal transportation system, among other policy areas. I have worked to build our community and state for success. I believe that government does play a positive role in our community. It is the mechanism by which we act collectively, we express our voice collectively. And while it should not be doing everything and cannot do everything, it does play a vital role. And I view my job as helping to steer that role appropriately to benefit the community as a whole.
Thank you. And next, we'll go to Mr. Winkler.
Thank you, and thank you to the League of Women Voters of St. Louis Park for putting on this forum. It's a pleasure to be back again this campaign cycle. A campaign cycle that is so unusual that it's unprecedented in anyone's who is currently living's life. We have a pandemic raging globally, and particularly in the United States of America. We have whole sections of our economy that have been hollowed out by the pandemic, and we have deep questions about the ability of our national leadership to meet the crisis. Fortunately, in Minnesota, we have a state legislature and a governor who have been bringing the best resources Minnesota has to fight COVID-19 and to do everything that we can to protect Minnesota's citizens, not only from the disease, but from the economic and financial chaos that the disease is bringing to our society. COVID-19 is a direct threat to the health and lives of millions of Minnesotans, and we need to be first and foremost prioritizing protecting Minnesotans from that in the next 2 years. We also have to continue the functions of state government, making sure that our kids have the best possible education under the circumstances, making sure that families have access to health care, making sure that we are building a better future for Minnesota's families, regardless of where they come from or what they look like or what their backgrounds. Minnesota has tremendous resources to deal with this crisis, and we have tremendous opportunity to make this state a better place in the years to come. I'm asking for your vote to return to the Minnesota House of Representatives as your state representative. I hope to return as majority leader of the Minnesota House, where I currently serve, and I pledge to continue my work on your behalf in state government to make this state the best place it could possibly be.
Thank you. And then we'll go to Ms. Joachim.
Hello, I am Cheryl Joachim, and it's been an honor to serve our communities of Hopkins and St. Louis Park as your state representative. And I ask for your vote once again, now or before on November 3rd. And I would like to thank the League for hosting this forum and for doing it in such a safe manner and for all that you do to encourage civic engagement. COVID has shown a harsh light of inequities on our communities. It's left businesses and families struggling, people feeling isolated, This year has shown us how important it is to have a government and economy that works for everyone and not just a select few. Talking to folks in our communities and across Minnesota, I found that we all want similar things. We want access to affordable health care, a dependable transportation system, quality education from early childhood through high school and beyond, and to protect our environment as well as our rights. Our rights to love who we love, worship how we choose, and to equal protection under the law no matter who we are, what we look like, or where we live. I've worked hard and supported legislation that upholds these values and will continue to do so if elected again. I also voted to pass legislation to fund our public schools, tackle high prescription costs, and lower taxes for hardworking Minnesotans. I've advocated for Southwest Light Rail, affordable housing, and a bonding bill that supports our communities of Hopkins and St. Louis Park. I am persistent and hardworking. I value community and developing relationships. I am accessible and welcome constructive conversations about the opportunities and challenges facing our community. I know that we have more success when we work together, and I look forward to having a conversation tonight.
Thank you. And now we will start with the questions, and we'll be starting with Mr. Winkler. You'll go first. First question is about COVID. COVID has caused our schools to pivot to different delivery models like hybrid and distance learning. What would you do to make sure our districts have what they need to keep our students, teachers, and staff safe while still delivering quality education? What are some solutions that could help mitigate the impact of budget shortfalls on student learning?
Well, that is a huge question. It is going to take more than a minute, 30 seconds to address that. It's going to take years probably after COVID is done. I am in the same boat with a lot of other parents in District 46A. I have 3 sons in public schools at Hopkins High School, Hopkins North Junior High, and Meadowbrook Elementary. My older 2 have not been in the school yet, even though they signed up for hybrid learning, and my youngest son at Meadowbrook is in 2 days per week. I'm fortunate in that my children do well under these circumstances, but I know that the kids who need help the most are the ones who are struggling the most under these circumstances and only making our education opportunity gaps worse. Minnesota had a crisis going in education going into COVID-19, and the long-lasting effects of this can be significant. We need to make sure that schools have the resources to adequately provide not just instruction in the classroom, but all of the support that kids need as they bring their problems in their lives to schools, and we are expecting teachers to help solve them. So we need to provide better funding and more sustainable funding at the state level for districts all across the state. And that is just the very beginning of what we need to do for education in Minnesota.
Thank you. And next, if Ms. Joachim could answer that.
Thank you. Representative Winkler is right. This is a very enormous question, but the pivot to distance learning in the spring was hard for everyone. And whether your student is learning in person, hybrid, or distance this fall, there are a lot of heroes out there making it happen, from our teachers to administrators to support staff, and especially our parents. Luckily, my children are actually in college and struggling through the same thing. And I actually have a brand new teacher in our family too. Our middle child just started teaching this year. So we have 6 teachers in our family, and I see how hard they've been working every day. But COVID really has shown a harsh light on the disparities in all of our systems, from healthcare and housing to the opportunity gap in our schools. And face it, our education delivery model was not meeting everyone's needs before COVID, let alone during. The good news is that this may be just what we need to force a reimagining of our delivery model. As a former para in a special education, I personally know the needs of some of our kiddos and understand the frustration on how to meet those needs during the pandemic. Districts are trying hard to bring those students back sooner, but we need to do that in a safe and possible way. And as it's been said tonight, our school districts are stretched, budgets are stretched really thin right now with these different models. In the next legislative session, we need to make sure we are not balancing the budget on the back of our schools. We need to provide flexibility of funding and do what we can to hold schools harmless. And then truly have that large conversation around our opportunity gap.
And next we'll go to Mr. Bjornson. Mr. Bjornson, can you take yourself off mute?
Okay,
There you go.
thank you. Linda, could you repeat the question, please? I
Sure.
didn't quite hear it.
No problem. COVID has caused our schools to pivot to different delivery models like hybrid and distance learning. What would you do to make sure our districts have what they need to keep our students, teachers, and staff safe while still delivering quality education? What are some solutions that could help mitigate the impact of budget shortfalls on student learning?
Well, one of the things that I believe should be done is more homeschooling, which is being done because of the COVID-19 epidemic. But one of the things I've heard that is going on is that teachers are saying that parents cannot interfere with the instructions that the students are getting. That means when I'm one of the students and I'm sitting at my computer doing my lessons,
Mr. Bjornson, it looks like we lost your audio.
internet connection is unstable. So if that continues, I unfortunately I had to leave another one of these formats because my computer wasn't working. I might have to leave this one also. I apologize if that happens.
And there is a lot of background noise. I don't know if that's something that you have any control over.
I have Pandora running in the background. One of my habits is I listen to music a lot because I enjoy listening to music. And so it might be coming in a little bit. When I'm done speaking, I'll go turn it off. But until then, one of the things is that it seems to me that whenever there's a problem with the schools, the immediate fallback idea is more funding and more bureaucracy. Why? We have fairly well-funded schools, a large bureaucracy, and student test scores are plummeting. So apparently the suggestions that have been put forth are not working. So why not try something new? And I'll take up with that.
Thank you. We'll go to our next question, and this time we'll be starting with you, Ms. Joachim. Our second question is, the global pandemic
Linda,
highlighted
if I may,
the lack of public health funding. What solutions and support do you support or propose to increase public health funding and public health education?
All right, thank you for that. No, and I'm Representative Latz, did you have something to quick say?
I just wanted an opportunity to answer the last question.
I did not give you that opportunity. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
All right. You might regret this. I hope not. I don't have a whole lot I can really add to what Representative Winkler and Representative Joachim said. These are very challenging times, and I think we are going to have to address them in several ways. One is to respect parental decisions about what they think is the safest and the best learning model to address their children's needs. Another is for the districts to try to provide the support that they can to their parents that are dealing with those situations, including support regarding how to support their own children when they're getting a lot more screen time than they usually did, and when in some cases they have a lot more downtime at home and are turning to other screens to fill the time gap. But with regard to the school resources, I guess I would say this. One is we should do a good job through the State Department of Education of perhaps gathering best practices as the districts are having experience and are learning how to implement their hybrid learning models or supporting kids who are doing all distance learning. And then secondly, I think we should look at maybe creating a little more flexibility in the use of certain funding pools that school districts already have so that they can perhaps move funds around where they will find it most beneficial for these unique times.
We'll go back to Ms. Joachim, and I can repeat the second question for you again. The global pandemic has highlighted a lack of public health funding. What solutions and support do you support or propose to increase public health funding and public health education?
Thank you. That's a really good question. You're right. One of the things the pandemic has taught us is that we need to invest in scientifically accurate public health education in our schools and in our communities. We need to find those public-private partnerships that will help us deliver the public health information into our communities. And we also need to make sure that it's done in a way that all our communities can access it and understand it. You saw a good example of that when we had the measles outbreak here in Hopkins a few years ago. Really working those public-private partnerships to figure out how to connect in our communities and the services that are already provided, working with our county health system as well. And finally, we should also make sure we're looking at policies that aren't disproportionately affecting our communities of color and Indigenous and under-resourced areas of our state. That would be my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll go to Mr. Bjornson. Mr. Bjornson, can you hear me? You're next. You have to, there you go.
Okay. Yeah, this Zoom is kind of an interesting little advancement. Okay, one of the things that needs to be done is to reopen the state. We need, the state needs money. The state gets money from taxes. With businesses closed by the order of Governor Walz, businesses aren't generating revenue. They don't have money to pay taxes. Yet Cheryl Joachim was advocating, sounds like she was advocating an increase in taxes. The people in the state of Minnesota are hurting financially because they've lost their jobs, their businesses have closed, because our governor has dictated that by fiat closed the state of Minnesota, open the state of Minnesota up again so that the businesses can pay taxes. And then, that is the way to solve this problem, is so that the state has the funding by being opened up again.
Thank you. And next we'll go to Mr. Latz.
So the pandemic has really demonstrated some of the stresses and fissures that we have in our current health delivery system. There are still large gaps in the numbers of persons who are insured. We are now creating a whole new class of pre-existing conditions with people who have had COVID already, who are going to be nervous about whether or not the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare will remain the law of the land and prohibit insurance companies from excluding pre-existing conditions from coverage or charging super premiums to cover them. And we've also witnessed from a national scale a lack of planning and coordination. Indeed, the president disbanded the pandemic response preparation team that was a cabinet level in the White House that he inherited from President
Ron, no, he did not. He did not do that. That is not.
I'm sorry, there's no interrupting. There's no interrupting. You let the other people answer their question. Thank you.
I think what we need to do is take a look at where these gaps have been created in testing, for example, in the availability of tests to all communities, particularly those that have been hit the hardest, the minority communities or communities of color that for a variety of reasons are being hit the hardest. I think in part because of underlying health disparities. There tends to be more comorbidity in the communities that have not had access to as healthy options or lifestyles as some of the majority communities have. It's going to be a great financial challenge, but I think we need to do a better job of planning and coordinating so that we can deliver the health services to everyone who needs it.
And next, Mr. Winkler.
First of all, it is vitally important that we learn from this pandemic and learn about how we responded well and not well. We can have an extended debate about the lack of leadership at the federal level and the inability to acknowledge the problem and provide resources and coordination around the country. But at the state level, we have a robust and strong health department in Minnesota, and we still need to learn what things we have done well and not well. I know that among the things that we started out behind the 8 ball on were the fact that outreach to communities of color and to communities that don't have access to or don't necessarily have trust in state agencies that are providing medical advice. And so finding out how to reach trusted people in the community who can spread positive information and useful information is one of the things that our health department has learned how to better do over time. But we need to really understand what we did well and what we did not do well, and then begin to fill in the gaps in how we are preparing for the next pandemic. One of the most unfortunate things in this pandemic is the way in which basic public health measures have been politicized and made into a partisan issue. And that is something that is, unfortunately, I don't think within the realm of public health professionals to fix. It is something that we all need to fix as part of our democratic process so that we can begin to have a common understanding of facts again and basic advice from experts that we can rely on. That is essential to our ability to fight a pandemic.
Thank you. For our next question, we'll be starting with Mr. Latz. The state is facing a possible $4.6 billion shortfall. What activities, programs, infrastructure projects will you prioritize as worth protecting from cuts? And what activities will you consider worth cutting?
Well, first, we should preface this by understanding that because in the last several years, we have taken great care to set aside resources into a reserve or rainy day fund. The $4.6 billion projected shortfall will not require $4.6 billion in cuts or revenues to close that gap. For many, many years, we did not have any reserves or any mandatory reserves. And I was a strong supporter of the effort of the requirement whenever we had a surplus to set aside a third of that as reserves. So that would eliminate about half of what is now the projected shortfall. Once we get there and have to start actually closing that gap, we've got a variety of tools, some of which are better than others. I think everything has to be on the table to do that. And I don't have a specific list right now of programs that I think ought to be eliminated or slimmed down. Of course, everyone's going to be fighting for the value of their own programs. But I think we do need to take a hard look at what's working best and what maybe needs to be retooled or resources can be put into other more productive uses. So that's a worthwhile activity that we should be doing constantly in government to make sure that we're using our resources from the taxpayers wisely. But it's really hard now to make those predictions. I think we'll have to take a look at what the budget projections are in the middle of the spring once we get a better idea of where the economy is going.
And next we'll go to Mr. Winkler.
We have obviously a significant economic and financial challenge in front of Minnesota, and state government is part of that, but more importantly, the people of Minnesota face that challenge. In the past, states and countries that have tried to go through a period of austerity with deep cuts to government in order to balance budgets and try to come out of a recession have found that it doesn't work. Minnesota, in fact, has the resources it takes to both take care of the people in our state and make sure that we are investing in a better future. We have had in recent years tax cuts to those at the top, tax cuts for big companies, both at the federal level and the state level. And the fact of the matter is that we can raise significant revenue in order to offset the economic losses that we're seeing. And that will better position us to make broader investments in education and health and economic opportunity for people all over Minnesota if we are looking to the long run. So I strongly support a broader revenue stream for the state based on people's ability to pay, not based on people paying where they are in a tough spot, but based on people's ability to pay, and leverage to investments in education and health that are forecast for inflation, where we are going to have a rising tide lifting all boats across the state. This is a moment and an opportunity to reset and recalibrate that investment in Minnesota, and I think that is the major work of this next budget year.
Excuse me, thank you. And next, Ms. Joachim.
Thank you for the question. It's a big thing we're going to have to tackle next session. First, we have to remember that we have overcome deficits before. Governor Dayton inherited a $6 billion deficit in the past, and we worked together to tackle it, and we need to do that again. But first, we need to get COVID under control. Until we do that, consumer confidence will just not be there. I was talking with one of our restaurant owners on Main Street the other day, and they said that even if they could have a capacity of 100% right now, they still wouldn't have a full restaurant. Folks need to feel safe going out. Next, we need to pass a bonding bill. It is an incredible tool to create jobs and spur the economy while tackling projects across the state that need to be done, and hopefully we'll be doing that in session tomorrow. Finally, everything has to be on the table. We need to look at ways to increase revenue as well as make some cuts. We have to do all that with balancing the health, safety, and our economy and quality of life that Minnesotans have come to expect, and frankly, that Minnesotans deserve.
Thank you. And Mr. Bjornson. Mr. Bjornson, would you like to answer that question?
Yes. Okay. Now I'm willing to bet a small nickel or so that Cheryl and Ryan voted today to keep the state closed in the state legislature. There is a big part of the problem. How many businesses that have were shut down because of the governor's mandate to close businesses are not going to reopen up again? A lot of them. Therefore, a lot of our possible tax revenue is disappearing. Now, Cheryl and Ryan have talked a lot about the terrible things that of the COVID-19. Well, they are making things worse by keeping the government, by keeping the state shut down. Open the state back up, cut taxes, and close government agencies. That's the way to do it.
Thank you. And for our next question, we'll start with Mr. Winkler. The pandemic has put a spotlight on the incredibly high number of people experiencing homelessness, but this problem has been building for years. Currently, county and local governments have primary responsibility for dealing with this issue. Do you think the state government should have a more central role in finding and implementing solutions? If yes, what ideas do you have? And if no, why not?
Well, first of all, the problem of affordable housing is it starts with unsheltered homelessness, people who need access to supportive housing, people who need access to public housing, starter homes, and all the way through middle-class families who are struggling to be able to afford decent housing in communities that we represent today. We have, at the largest level, a supply and demand problem where it's expensive to build new housing. And we have a population that's growing and demanding more housing than the market is providing. So I do think there is a role for the state in helping to provide incentives for local communities to expand their affordable housing construction through property tax incentives. We certainly have housing infrastructure bonds that we use to support affordable housing, but it's a serious and significant problem. We do need to provide funding at the state level. We do need to encourage local communities to expand affordable housing options in their communities, and we need to look at ways to expand the housing supply, which probably comes down to changes in zoning and planning in a lot of local communities. So it's a multi-pronged problem, and it is going to require a multi-pronged solution to begin to make housing more affordable for the entire population.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Joachim.
Thank you so much for that. Stable housing really intersects a lot of our other avenues for folks. If you think about it, our kids learning in school, it's hard for a kid to learn if they don't know if they're going to have a roof over their head from night to night. Folks seeking jobs or maintaining jobs, hard to do that if you don't have stable housing. So this is something, as Representative Wiggler said, we've been trying to tackle. Supporting housing bonds and the bonding bill coming up is a huge thing. Making sure we're creating public and private partnerships, as well as working with our counties and cities to find ways to invest in workforce housing and development. I was very proud to also support the Beacon project that was in Hopkins last year, spoke in front of the city council, because it's so important for us to have a variety of housing, workforce housing, housing for folks that face chronic homelessness, and housing for people to get started. So there is a multi-pronged approach we have to take, and it's going to take folks at the city level, county level, state level, and federal level, frankly, to get this done.
Thank you. Mr. Bjornson? Mr. Bjornson, would you like to answer this question? You're next.
Okay. One of the things that affects the affordable housing are zoning laws. Zoning laws are generally local and something the state doesn't have much to do with. So, you know, if the zoning law, like the city of Hopkins, changes their zoning laws, making housing more, that will help make housing more affordable. Another thing is property taxes. In the last 2 years here in Hennepin County, my property taxes have gone up 47%. I have not gotten a 47% raise in the last 2 years. You know, taxes keep going up and up and up and up. If my property taxes go up, I am going to be priced out of my home. You know, cut property taxes. You know, find ways to make the government smaller so that it doesn't need the taxes, and let the private sector come up with solutions.
Thank you. And Mr. Lex?
Yes, you know, I agree with Mr. Bjornson that local zoning rules do have an important role to play here. When I was on the city council, we broadened the ability to have secondary housing on the same lot, sometimes referred to as mother-in-law apartments, or to provide for units above garages, for example, and to adjust setbacks to accommodate some of that. And you can also address issues relating to the maximum number of people that are not related that can live in the same space, so that families can broaden to include friends when people need places to stay, or when they get challenged in terms of keeping a roof over their head. Affordable housing has been a long-term problem, and it is fundamentally a mismatch between the demand for housing and the availability of affordable housing. The fact is, it's just not financially feasible for many people to develop new housing that is affordable without some kind of public subsidies, either tax credits or other, TIF funding to help offset costs, especially in first ring or inner community, inner ring suburbs that are reusing land rather than converting pristine green fields. We also should take a look at expanding our mental health care availability and our supportive services to those who are in the shelters to help them get into stable, longer term sheltering. And the last thing I'll say is many of our homeless are veterans that are dealing with after effects, PTSD, especially of their service. And it's important for us to make sure that we reach out to them and get them into appropriate services and support as well.
Thank you. Our next question will be starting with Ms. Joachim. Recently, the Star Tribune reported that QAnon candidates are running as Republicans in several districts in Minnesota. What is your opinion of their conspiracy theory movement, and do you feel that they could present a problem at the state legislature?
Thank you for that question. I'll have to think about this for a second. First of all, I believe that we always do better when we work on issues together. So at the state level, I've always had a proven track record of working across the aisle. As the chair of the Education and Policy Committee, I make sure to hear bills from members across the aisle. If it's a good idea and deserves a hearing, it should not matter who the author is. But that makes it tough when we have such divisive political discourse, polarization, and proliferation of false information and conspiracy theories, frankly, that threaten our democracy. So we need to do a better job as a society at checking sources and consuming information and frankly, teaching our kids in schools how to do that now that we have such a proliferation of the electronic age and all the different platforms. So I welcome folks at the Capitol that are willing to work across the aisle and work with each other and engage in democracy and actually want to see a state move forward together.
Mr. Bjornson?
This was a question about QAnon, right?
Yes, do you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Recently, the Star Tribune reported that the QAnon candidates are running as Republicans in several districts in Minnesota. What is your opinion of their conspiracy theory movement? And do you feel that they could present a problem at the state legislature?
No. The reason I don't is because the QAnon problem is a figment of the Star Tribune's imagination. It is an overblown thing. The number of QAnons that are running for the state legislature would have trouble crowding a phone booth. So it is not a problem to be concerned about.
Mr. Latz?
Well, I think they actually do pose a danger to society as a whole, as well as the functioning of the legislature if they get in there. You know, as has been used in the past, the phrase that you're entitled to your own opinions, but not to your own facts. And these conspiracy theories are born out of falsehoods that are spread more widely across the internet now, and are frankly dangerous ideas. And those who are espousing those ideas are very hard to work with. And like Representative Joachim, I've got a track record of working on a bipartisan basis. When I chaired the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee in the Senate, we passed a lot of bipartisan legislation. I've gotten a lot of stuff passed even as a minority member now in the Senate, just like I did when I served in the House. But for those who are unwilling to stay grounded in a common factual basis, they're very hard to work with because they look at the world through not only a particular filter, but a false filter. And you can't reason with people like that. All you can do is say, no, you're just flat out wrong. And I don't say that lightly, but there are some facts that are just demonstrably not true. And there are about a half a dozen people who have running for the legislature this year who have expressed support for the ideas and conspiracy theories that are just not grounded in any fact whatsoever. They would be very difficult to work with if they were to get into the legislature, no matter how much we would like to try to work across the aisle to get things done for the community.
Thank you. Mr. Winkler?
We live in a very destabilizing time. I think the combination of a global pandemic, a kind of presidential leadership style that is deeply divisive and frankly promotes extremist ideas and weird conspiracy theories, makes this a time when it's unsettling for Americans to even trust each other across party lines or understand where the other side is coming from. And so I don't look at QAnon on its own. It is a bizarre conspiracy theory based on, frankly, very dark ideas about what's happening with Democratic politicians and the federal government, which serves all of us. In fact, it's part of a bizarre fringe tradition that has become louder in recent years. I think partly enabled by technology and a news cycle that is always looking for whatever is the most sensational thing to promote, and simultaneously promoted by one political party that delights in undermining people's basic confidence in our democratic system. That is not consistent with what most Republicans I know or work with behave like, but there is an element there that has grown much louder in recent years.
Thank you. And our next question will start with Mr. Latz. With everyone stuck at home due to the pandemic, is the time right for legalizing marijuana, recreational marijuana? If yes, what are the benefits of doing so? And if no, why not?
Well, I don't want to take any of Representative Winkler's thunder here because he's been very proactive in fashioning a potential regulatory structure for legalizing marijuana. And if done the right way, I would support it as well. It would certainly pull some of the violence out of the distribution network and some of the excessive profits that promote that violence and turf wars out of the distribution network. And there are some potential benefits, not only medically and research-wise to any plant, but in particular marijuana, as we are learning more of it and removing research restrictions, we're finding that there's some very therapeutic benefits as well. This is a question, my friends have joked about this too, as we're talking about being locked up in our homes or restricted in our ability to go out and socialize and relieve stress in other ways. But I think maybe it's put a finer point on the question, but I think the bigger question is, can we do it safely? Can we do it in a manner that includes appropriate guardrails around its availability in society, particularly for our youth? And if we can do that, then I would support legalizing recreational marijuana.
Mr. Winkler?
Well, I have led the effort in the Minnesota House over the last year and a half to create a legalized, regulated framework for cannabis. Certainly, we have to recognize that there are public health concerns with a substance like cannabis. Children and adolescents shouldn't use it. It's not good for their developing brains, and it can exacerbate certain psychological conditions for adults. But fundamentally, the prohibition of cannabis using the criminal justice system is a failed approach to addressing the problems that do exist with marijuana. And so I strongly support a system where we legalize it, regulate it, and make sure that people not only know where it's coming from when they consume it, but also that we know where the cannabis sources are in our communities. We need to eliminate the illicit marketplace and provide a safe pathway for people to use a substance that, frankly, 2/3 of people think is safe and legal is safe and should be legal, and to use a criminal justice system with deeply racially discriminatory application of those laws to enforce this when 2/3 of people think it should be legal is just not a legitimate form of control, and it's not a legitimate use of our criminal justice system.
Ms. Joachim?
Thank you. I have to say, frankly, that I've moved on this subject. Started out with skepticism as a mother of three when our kids were teenagers, but now they're well beyond college, most of them except for one. And I have moved on this. And I really do want to thank Representative Winkler for leading the charge on this and working with so many of our colleagues in the House to develop a pretty strong bill. Frankly, we're creating a whole new business. So we have to make sure we do it right. And if anybody can do it right, I think Minnesota can. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. I still would like to see a field sobriety test, and I want to make sure that we're not offering it to kids under 21. But like I said, look forward to having that discussion this coming session.
Mr. Bjornson? Mr. Bjornson?
Yeah. Actually, I come at this from a rather unique perspective. One, as a recovered alcoholic, I have probably smoked more pot than all of you put together. So I know quite a bit about smoking pot, and it didn't have any long-term detrimental effects on me. One of the reasons I would like to see it legalized is my older brother was convicted of a felony for smuggling marijuana into the country. It ruined his life. Another perspective is that my nephew, who lives out in California, runs a medical.
We lost your audio. We lost your audio, Mr. Bjornson.
Connection, but you know, here I tend to agree with pretty much the other participants in this forum. Legalize marijuana, make it safe, make it available, regulate it like alcohol is, and you know, another form of revenue for our state.
Our next question will start with Mr. Winkler. Should the state play a role in police reform? If yes, what changes should be implemented at the state level?
Well, we certainly have a major challenge in front of us in Minnesota. The level of racial disparities in our policing and our criminal justice system is among the worst in the country. And we saw the very visceral and powerful reaction to the murder of George Floyd this summer, which culminated, frankly, in decades of understanding of the kind of abusive police practices we saw in Minneapolis over the years, and in a system that is just unfair. So the state has a significant role to play. I'm happy to say that we made a significant step forward this summer in passing a police reform and accountability bill. We did that on a bipartisan basis with Senate Republicans, and it begins to address licensing concerns, the arbitration and grievance process for police officers so we can have more accountability, and it provides for better training. But we still have a long ways to go in police reform. And I look forward to working both in the next legislative session and in the years to come on making sure that we are creating a system that is more fair, more colorblind, and more likely to create justice in our communities and restore people to a better pathway in their lives, rather than continuing down a pathway of militarizing our police and creating the kind of us versus them mindset that doesn't create safety in our communities. And safety in our communities is what everybody has a right to expect and what we should be providing.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Joaquin.
Thank you. Everyone deserves to be safe and feel respected in the communities that they work and live. This is a time I think we can finally start looking at what we're really asking our officers to respond to, and either make sure they have the tools to do that appropriately or take it off their plate. I proudly supported the bipartisan People of Color and Indigenous Caucus Police Accountability Bill in the House that Representative Winkler spoke about and was signed into law by the governor, that dealt with licensing and training, but we still need to do a lot more when it comes to some civilian oversight and accountability. And I look forward to continuing that work in the upcoming session.
Thank you. Mr. Bjornson?
There's a simple solution to this problem. That simple solution is to realize the fact that there is only one race, the human race. According to our DNA, all human beings are 99.9% the same. It's 1/10 of 1% that makes us different. There is no black race. There is no white race. We're all human beings. When we start looking at everybody as a human being, not as a member of another race, then this problem will be solved.
Thank you. Mr. Latz?
Thank you for the question. And if I get reelected and if the Democrats become the majority in the Senate, I anticipate that I will be chair once again of the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee, where many of the legislative efforts to address these concerns will be formulated and debated and discussed and ultimately, I believe, passed. The first step is to recognize that the existing system does have a fundamental racist component to it. And even though race is a human construct, it's not a biological construct. The fact is humans have viewed people of color in our country as in some ways inferior or more threatening. And the whole concept of the police forces have been grown up in some communities around restricting the rights and abilities of people in the minority communities from fully engaging in their communities and the communities around them. So first you got to acknowledge that there is a problem. If we get back to the underlying precepts of community policing, where there's a fundamental respect between the communities and the police and a sharing of information and a trust, then the communities of color that also want to be safe and do want to have police presence will be able to work together to protect all of us. But we need to broaden the post board's authority to discipline errant officers. We need to actually ban chokeholds and not leave the gaps that the legislation this past spring left for it.
Thank
We
you.
have the ability to weed out the bad apples through arbitration and grievance review, as well as standards.
Sorry, your time is up. Thank you.
Big topic.
Our next question, we'll start with Ms. Joachim. There was news coverage of a private security company in Tennessee recruiting a large contingent of former U.S. military special operations personnel to guard polling sites in Minnesota on Election Day. What is the best way to protect our right to vote safely? Should we eliminate in-person voting? And that goes to Ms. Joachim. And you're still on mute.
Yep, sorry about that. I think I was just thrown off, but the end of the question seemed to end abruptly. Sorry about that. No, first I want to say I don't think we could thank Secretary of State Steve Simon and his team enough for how safe they have been making our elections and accessible and secure. So no, I don't think we have to change our voting system. No excuse absentee balloting has allowed folks to safely access ballots during our pandemic. This is the same system that's been allowed by our military members to vote overseas. It has layers of checks and balances to make sure the right person is submitting the ballot. For years, multiple counties in Minnesota have had mail-in balloting provisions and has been proven to be successful and secure. The Secretary of State's office has partnered with our local election officials in our counties and cities to make sure that they have the tools they need to count our ballots and also keep them secure. So folks should feel, I'll say it over again, feel very secure in casting their ballots either by mail, absentee, early in person, on or before November 3rd. And I have the utmost confidence in the fact that Minnesota can do this right. And as a reminder, it is not allowable to have folks within 100 yards of a polling place intimidating voters. So glad that the Secretary of State put that out there and made that very clear.
Mr. Bjornson? Mr. Bjornson?
I would strongly recommend that we bring back in-person voting. And, you know, eliminate as much as possible. I mean, mail-in voting is helpful for a lot of people that are out of state or traveling. It's a very helpful tool. Absentee voting is also good. But if we, voting in person and with requiring a valid ID to vote. I have a list on my computer of things that you are required to have a valid ID to do. Drive a car, buy alcohol, open a bank account, a number of things that require a valid ID. Voting is one of the most important things we do in our country. So why not protect it with a valid ID when a person goes to vote in person?
Thank you. Mr. Lance?
Well, I guess I would first say that, again, we need to identify what problem, if any, there is. And there has not been any demonstrable problem of fraudulent voting by absentee or in the form of false identification. Just a tiny fraction of people have even attempted to do that. And often it's a mistake that they make, and it's not intended to defraud the system. So I don't think there's a problem to address there. I want to encourage everyone to be confident, as I am, that whether they vote by mail or they vote in person early or they vote in person on election day, that their vote will be counted and without any issues of fraud. So first of all, most important is vote. Then I would say, with regard to the question about armed militia coming in, it is illegal to intimidate voters. And despite what some have said, go to the polls, keep an eye on things. The polling places themselves inside the buildings where the voting takes place are not open for anyone just to walk into and look over your shoulders. They only people who have been pre-authorized to be in there, including the public who are coming in to cast their ballot because they live in that precinct, they're allowed to be in there. But militia will not be allowed to walk into the polling places. And our law enforcement, I'm sure, will be keeping an eye if there's any voter intimidation going on. But I want to encourage voters, don't be intimidated by it. Show up and vote.
Thank you. Mr. Winkler?
Well, Minnesota has a terrific track record of being a state with the highest voter turnout pretty consistently. Minnesotans believe very strongly in doing their civic duty and having their votes be heard or their votes be counted. And we do an excellent job of counting votes. We have really amongst the highest possible level of voter protection while having a very open system for people to be able to register on election day, vote by mail, vote in person, absentee, etc. So we have an excellent system in Minnesota, and we do need to encourage people to show up and vote. In fact, voting early is your best option because your vote will get counted, and we don't know what's going to happen with COVID-19 or other things as election day gets closer. Your safest bet is to vote early when you're not going to be crowded and there's an opportunity to make sure that your vote gets counted. That's the best possible thing to do. And as for the rest of it, there's a lot of conspiracy. There's a lot of deliberate shade thrown at our election system, creating this idea that there is voter fraud or that there might be intimidation. All of that is done with the purpose of discouraging you to show up and vote. It is done because a certain group of people don't believe that they can win elections honestly, and they want to intimidate and push people away from the polls. Show up, vote, the system works, And that is the best way to combat any kind of claims that are being made about militia or anybody else.
Thank you. Our next question will start with you, Mr. Latz. What steps does the state need to take for economic recovery of businesses and individuals after the impact of the pandemic?
Well, first we should recognize that even during the shutdown last spring, that if my memory is right, about 78% of workers in Minnesota were in one form or another considered to be essential and continued to work. There was certainly economic impact as their work shifted from common business offices into their homes. There was stress relating to daycare. There were the support services for concentrations of offices that struggled, including restaurants and bars and places, entertainment areas that were shut down because those are areas of congregation that would in fact have spread the COVID and couldn't be done safely. Best thing we can do for our economic recovery is to effectively address the pandemic, to reduce the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Once we do that, people will have the confidence to be able to go back into their workplaces, to make investments, to go out and spend money. So that's the most important thing. Another thing we can do is to, for the state and for our local governments, to remove any perceived barriers for businesses getting through regulatory hurdles to reopen or to clean up where they've had issues so they can get back open again. But the fact is, we're going through a big transition. We're gonna look different when we come out of it. But if we all do it together with confidence, it will happen.
Thank you. Mr. Winkler?
The pandemic is having a very different impact on people depending on what kind of industry they're working in. Some industries are stronger than they have ever been. Some are doing just fine. Some are completely hollowed out and gutted. And we have to have a response from the federal government that continues to keep people afloat when their ability to work in their professions or in their sectors has been eliminated by the pandemic. So first and foremost, continuing federal support for unemployment is vitally important through the duration of the pandemic. Second of all, we need to get our hands on the pandemic itself. We need to control cases and we need to make sure that we aren't expanding like we're seeing in our surrounding states. One of the biggest threats to our economy is people who are skeptical of the basic public health measures that we need to take in order to protect people. So wearing masks, being socially distanced, limiting the size of groups indoors, making sure that outdoor gatherings remain safe. Those kinds of things are essential for our economy to recover. We could eliminate all of the governor's existing limitations on gathering spaces and our economy would not come back until the virus is controlled. We all need to take the steps to make sure that we are actually employing the public health measures necessary to stop this disease. And until we do that, we will not open up and we will not recover.
Thank you. Mr. Bjornson?
Okay, one of the things that I'm a student of history, and in 1918, we had the Spanish flu. We were just coming off of the First World War. Okay, during the Spanish flu epidemic, is estimated 20 to 50 million people around the world died. In 1 month in the United States, over 400,000 people died. 1 month. That we have not had that problem here with the COVID-19 epidemic. You know, the epidemic is a problem. The disease is a problem, but the mortality rate is about 2%. After we had the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic and World War I, our economy came back in the 1920s and boomed. Get the government out of the way and our economy will boom. Yeah, I see Ryan shaking his head, and he's wrong. History has proven him wrong. Get the government out of the way, let it do what it's supposed to do, and our economy will boom.
Thank you. Ms. Joachim?
Thank you. So I'm a student of history too, and we should all know that the second wave of the Spanish flu was worse than the first. So we still have to keep safe, follow guidelines, distance, mask. Frankly, if adults started doing their job, we'd see this end a lot quicker so that we could get back to continuing to grow our economy. One thing that COVID has also shown us is that our childcare system and education system are drivers of our economy. And I was happy to see Governor Walz today give some more money to stabilize our childcare system to keep them up and running. We need to continue supporting our small businesses and expand our unemployment. We're going to have to count on the federal government to help us out so that we can get some more money to our counties and cities to help them stabilize their budgets as well. But I think if we all work together and start working together to fight the pandemic instead of each other, things will get a lot better.
Thank you. We're getting close to the end here, so I think we're going to move to the final statements. And this time, instead of alphabetical order, we're going to do reverse order. And so we will be starting with you, Ms. Joachim.
Once again, thank you so much for the forum. And as a state representative, it's really important to listen to community members and understand what they value. Why it's been harder to have those conversations face-to-face during COVID. I've held outdoor community conversations in parks and folks' front and backyards. I've talked to folks via Zoom and on the phone. I welcome all those conversations and the chance to answer your questions and hear about your hopes and your dreams for Minnesota. Please feel free to continue to contact me at cheryl@cheryljoachim.com so that we can continue to have those conversations. And I know I've said it a few times tonight, but I do firmly believe that we all do better when we come together to tackle problems instead of the politics of fear and division. So thank you again for watching this forum and being civically engaged in our community. And please make sure you get out and vote. And I ask for your vote on or before November 3rd. Have a great night.
Thank you. Mr. Winkler?
Thank you to the League of Women Voters for this forum and for all the work that you do in our community to promote civic engagement, policy research, and understanding of critical issues facing public decision makers. As I said at the beginning, we face an unprecedented crisis economically, with our health and safety, and a political crisis of failed leadership. Minnesota has the resources it takes to protect our people and build a better state in communities across the state. Regardless of what you look like or what your background is, you should have an opportunity to create a life of opportunity, prosperity, and equity in your community. I strongly support the kind of Minnesota that we all believe in, where everybody has a chance to get ahead. We have big work ahead of us, and with your support, I can return to the Minnesota House of Representatives and help lead a DFL majority to put us back on a path towards prosperity and growth in Minnesota. We have wonderful opportunities ahead of us. We have a wonderful state. We have wonderful people, and we can come together and invest in our children's future, in our own future, and create the kind of security and abundance that allows us to welcome new members of the community in Minnesota, expand our opportunity to everybody, and to really shine a light on how this state can lead the nation and lead the world, and many people coming together to create a better life together. That's what I will do and work for with your support.
Thank you. Mr. Latz?
Thank you again to the League for sponsoring this forum, giving us an opportunity to share our views directly with the voters. And I want to emphasize a couple of things in closing here. One issue we did not address was the existential threat to our world of climate change. And one thing that we really do need to do is to find a way to a carbon-free future to eliminate the emission of greenhouse gases, because as we are seeing all around us, we have a threat to the safety and security of our own environment posed by climate change. We certainly need to address the pandemic, and to that end, I want to encourage everyone to wear their masks, Stay socially distant, especially if you are indoors. Avoid large gatherings indoors, and wash your hands. We have the opportunity to come together as communities to reduce the partisan and harsh rhetoric directed at each other, and to plan to collaborate and work together to address all of these issues in the next legislative session and beyond. I've got a history of doing that. I'd like to continue doing that work. Whether it's from expanding our transportation system to addressing gun violence. I will note another issue we didn't bring up today, but I'm very proud to be the chief author in the Senate of the expanding background checks for firearms purchases, and also the extreme risk protection order, or red flag bill, to give courts the authority to take firearms out of the hands of those who are in an extreme crisis of their own personal situation, and that would protect domestic violence and protect all of us as well. I welcome the opportunity to address my constituents' concerns directly. I welcome your phone calls, your emails. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I ask for your vote on or before November 3rd.
Thank you. Mr. Bjornson?
I would like to also make it unanimous thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this forum. And there's been some talk about divisiveness in politics. And I'd like to share a little story. In 1954, Hubert Humphrey ran for re-election for the United States Senate. When he came home from a day of campaigning, his son came up and asked him, "Dad, what are you going to do if you lose the election?" And Humphrey said, "Well, son, if I lose, my opponent will do a great job, and you don't have to worry about a thing, because he will be a great United States senator." The gentleman Hubert Humphrey was talking about was my uncle, Val Bjornson, who ran against Humphrey. You know, we need to bring back that kind of friendliness in politics. You know, how it disappeared, why it disappeared, I don't know. And, you know, I don't really care I'm not going to blame Ron, Cheryl, Brian, the Democrats, the Republicans, or anybody. What we need to do is, like Cheryl has said, and Ryan has said, and Ron has said, find a way to bridge the gap, work together, because I'm applying for a job to work for the citizens of the Senate District 46. They will be my boss if I am elected. And my job is to make the Senate District as best place for them to live, and the state of Minnesota the best place for them to live. So if people want to improve the life in the state of Minnesota, I would appreciate their vote on November 3rd. And thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the candidate forum for this evening. We'd like to thank all the members of the League of Women Voters of St. Louis Park, and a special thanks to Jermaine and the City of St. Louis Park for assisting with this recorded forum. The general election is November 3rd. Polling places are listed on the City of St. Louis Park website. Absentee ballots are now available from the city, or you can request a ballot by mail from the city clerk administrator by calling 952-924-2503. The ballot must be received by the city no later than the day of the election. Thanks again. Stay safe and have a great night.